welcome back guys. Now let's continue with the topic of transport of gases. Okay, so how many gases we have to transport? So we have to transport two major gases. One is the oxygen and the carbon dioxide. Tell me guys, where we have to transport this oxygen? From where to where? We have to transport this oxygen from the lungs, because oxygen is present in our lungs. Okay, we are taking it from the environment. So we have to transport this oxygen from lungs to our tissues. Okay, from the lungs to the tissues. Now, from where to where we have to transport the carbon dioxide? Carbon dioxide we have to transport from our tissues, because our tissues produce the carbon dioxide. From tissues back to the lungs, we have to transport it to the lungs, tissues to the lungs. So we have to transport these two gases. First, in this video, we will be discussing mainly about the oxygen transport, how oxygen is getting transported, okay, from the lungs to the tissues. See, there are two ways by which we will transport the oxygen. Okay, two ways by which we will transport the oxygen. That is, 97% of our oxygen will go along with the hemoglobin Hb. So this is called as oxyhemoglobin. Oxyhemoglobin. So 97% of the oxygen is going along with the hemoglobin, oxyhemoglobin. But the remaining 3% of the oxygen, it is going in the form of dissolved oxygen, dissolved in the plasma. So only 3% of the oxygen is dissolved in the plasma. It's dissolved in the plasma. But 97% of the oxygen is going in the form of oxyhemoglobin. Okay, so oxygen from our lungs is going to the tissues in two forms. Some as oxyhemoglobin and some as dissolved oxygen. But right now, I want you to know one point. Trust me and just by heart it. Later I will explain you why. Sir, it is this 3%. Okay, it's 3% dissolved oxygen is most important. See, this the 3% dissolved oxygen, it is the one responsible for the development of partial pressure. So it is the one responsible for what? For the partial pressure. Okay, partial pressure. So what exactly is this partial pressure? We will discuss that later. But if I use the word partial pressure of oxygen in the blood vessel, partial pressure of oxygen in the arteries or partial pressure of oxygen in the veins. So it's always the partial pressure is due to dissolved oxygen, not the oxyhemoglobin. Remember this first point. So always partial pressure either in artery or a vein or a tissue. Always the partial pressure is because of dissolved oxygen. How much is the dissolved oxygen? 3%. Okay. Next up, let's say some basic values. Okay, sir. We all know 1 gram of hemoglobin, let's say, okay, 1 gram of hemoglobin carry how much oxygen? Sir, 1 gram of hemoglobin, yeah, can carry 1.34 ml of oxygen. 1 gram of hemoglobin can carry up to 1.34 ml of oxygen. We all know hemoglobin can bind with oxygen. So 1 gram of this protein called as hemoglobin can carry up to how much ml of oxygen? 1.34 ml of oxygen. Fine, good. But I'm asking you, do I have only 1 gram of hemoglobin? No. So in a healthy individual, say recently I had my HB test, okay. So tell me, in a healthy individual, how much hemoglobin is present? 15. My value is 15. You know, females will be having 12, 13, 11. Okay. Most of the females are anemic. So what I'm trying to say, what is that 15 value? What is my HB value? My HB value is 15. It means I'm having 15 grams of hemoglobin in every deciliter. Deciliter means 100 ml. So imagine I'm taking a 100 ml bottle. So in this 100 ml of water, or in this, let's say in this 100 ml of blood, let's say 100 ml of blood. In this 100 ml of blood, how much hemoglobin is present? 15 grams of hemoglobin present. So always remember, in your 100 ml of your blood, how much hemoglobin will be present? 15 grams. So that is 15 grams per deciliter. Okay, fine. So that's what I have written here. In a healthy individual, okay, in a healthy person, 15 grams per deciliter. So tell me, every gram can carry 1.34. So 15 into 1.34. Every gram carries 1.34 ml of oxygen. So 15 into 1.34, how much? 15 into 1.34, that is 20 ml per every 100 ml of blood. So from today, you have to know your 100 ml of blood, in your 100 ml of arterial blood, okay, not the venous blood, arterial blood. Your 100 ml of arterial blood carries how much oxygen? 20 ml of oxygen. Okay, 20 ml of oxygen is there. That's the oxygen carrying capacity. So this is oxygen carrying capacity. Okay, this is how to calculate the oxygen carrying capacity. Now let me ask you a question. Let's say a 16-year-old boy, 16-year-old, his hemoglobin is, let's say 14. Okay, his hemoglobin is, let's say 14, and they're asking what is 14 grams per deciliter. That's what I mean, 14 grams per deciliter. What is the oxygen carrying capacity? What is his oxygen carrying capacity? How to calculate? You all know oxygen carrying capacity is nothing but 14. Now he is having 14. So 14 into 1.34. 14 into 1.34, it will be somewhere around 18. Okay, it will be somewhere around 18 ml. 18 ml per deciliter. So this is how to calculate the oxygen carrying capacity. Again I am repeating, sir, 1 gram can carry 1.34. 1 deciliter of your blood can carry 20 ml. So some students will confuse, sir, one molecule I am talking, I am not talking about 1 gram, I'm talking about 1 molecule of hemoglobin. This is 1 molecule of hemoglobin. Sir, 1 molecule of hemoglobin can carry how many molecules of oxygen? 4 molecules of oxygen. So, 1 molecule can carry up to 4 molecules of oxygen. Okay. Now, if you understand this, now let's see how exactly the gas are getting transported, how oxygen is getting transported. For that, you have to understand this diagram. Here I am talking about the alveolus. Okay, here I am talking about the alveolus. Whatever I am showing here on the red side, this is the arterial blood, and this blue color side is the venous blood. Arterial blood, venous blood. And down here, these are your tissues. Okay, these yellow color things, these are your tissues. Now, let's begin our topic with the venous blood. I am talking about the venous blood. Now, how much venous blood I am taking? I am taking 1 deciliter. Okay, 1 deciliter, that is 100 ml. I am taking 100 ml of venous blood. Okay, 100 ml of venous blood. Doesn't matter, sir, arterial blood or venous blood, doesn't matter. Always in 100 ml of your blood, how much hemoglobin will be present? 15 grams. Do you think it will change from arterial to venous blood? Do you think the hemoglobin will change? No. So, hemoglobin is still 15 grams. Arterial blood, venous blood, 15 grams is there. But where is the difference? Hemoglobin saturation is different. See, here it is venous blood, right? So, this hemoglobin molecule, this one guy, this hemoglobin molecule, he is carrying how many molecules of oxygen? He is carrying only 3 molecules of oxygen. It's a venous blood, no? So, definitely less oxygen is there. So, not 4 molecules of oxygen is sitting, only 3 molecules of oxygen is sitting. So, how much percent saturated? 25, 25, 25. If all molecules are occupied, I will say 100% saturated. Okay, if all 4 pockets are occupied, I will say 100% saturated. But only here 3 pockets are occupied, 3 molecules are sitting. So, only 75% saturated. So, hemoglobin saturation is 75%. Okay, 75%. Next, what is the partial pressure of oxygen? Okay, PO2. The partial pressure of oxygen is 40 mmHg. Okay, the partial pressure of oxygen is 40 mmHg. Now, sir, why it is 40 mmHg? What is this partial pressure of oxygen? Just trust me, I will explain you. Okay, in 5 minutes it will come. So, the partial pressure of oxygen, already I have told you the partial pressure of oxygen is because of the dissolved oxygen. So, now here the partial pressure of oxygen here in the venous blood, this is the venous blood, right? Partial pressure of oxygen in the venous blood, how much is that? 40 mmHg, and why it is 40, I will explain you. Next, how much content of oxygen is there? How much content of oxygen? This O2, how much oxygen is there? I have explained you in arterial blood, in 100 ml of arterial blood, see, in 100 ml of arterial blood, there will be 20 ml of oxygen. That's the oxygen carrying capacity when 4 molecules are occupied. So, 100 ml of arterial blood carries 20 ml of oxygen, okay, but this is venous blood, no, so definitely there should be less oxygen. So, how much oxygen is there, sir? So, the content of oxygen is only 15 ml, okay, 15 ml of oxygen is there. So, now again, what are the parameters that you should know? The parameters, sir, how much hemoglobin is there? 15 grams. What is the saturation? Only 75% saturation. What is the partial pressure of oxygen? The partial pressure of oxygen is only 40 mmHg. And how much is the content of oxygen? Content of oxygen is only 15 ml. Okay, 15 ml, sir. Now, see, this deoxygenated blood, where is it going? It is going to the lungs for the first time. It is going to happily it is coming to the lungs to get the oxygen. Students, you have to understand, see, always this is the constant value. What is the partial pressure of oxygen in the capital A means alveolus? The partial pressure of oxygen in the alveolus, let's take it as 100 mmHg. Okay, actual value is somewhere around 104 mmHg. But for easy understanding purpose, let's say 100 mmHg. Okay, here the value is 100 mmHg. The partial pressure of alveolus, the partial pressure of oxygen always in the alveolus 100 mmHg. Now, you tell me, what is the partial pressure of oxygen here, sir? The partial pressure of oxygen in this deoxygenated blood. Okay, let me write in the blue color. The partial pressure of oxygen here in the deoxygenated blood is 40 mmHg. Okay, 40 mmHg. So now, here there is high partial pressure. Here there is low partial pressure. So there is a pressure difference according to the fixed law of diffusion. We all know according to the fixed law of diffusion, gases will go from high value to low value, high partial pressure to low partial pressure. So immediately the oxygen will start to diffuse. See, oxygen is diffusing. Diffuse. Oxygen is diffusing into the blood. Let's say 100 molecules of oxygen diffused. Okay, 100 molecules of oxygen diffused. Now out of this 100 molecules, now how many molecules came here? Now 100 new molecules of oxygen there. Okay, 100 new molecules of oxygen there. Sir, out of this oxygen, do you know what happens? Sir, it's a 3% oxygen. First, what happens is 3% of the oxygen. Okay, 3% of oxygen is dissolved. Okay, 3% of the oxygen is going to be dissolved. Now, you tell me, you are gaining the dissolved oxygen or you are losing the dissolved oxygen? You are gaining the dissolved oxygen. Now, 3% oxygen dissolved, immediately dissolved. So, you got this dissolved oxygen. So, have I taught you? It's because of the dissolved oxygen, the partial pressure is developed. So, as new dissolved oxygen is occurring here, okay, 3% of the oxygen is getting dissolved here. What will happen to the partial pressure? Now, the partial pressure, it will rise from 40 to 100 mmHg. So, from 40, see, from 40, it is rising to 100 because 3% of the oxygen is dissolved. Okay, so now tell me what happened to the partial pressure. Partial pressure rises. Now whenever the partial pressure rises, you know what happens? The remaining 97%. Okay, 3% dissolved. What about the remaining 97%? Now only whenever there is a rise in partial pressure, now the hemoglobin will accept the remaining 97% of the oxygen. One molecule of oxygen will be accepted by one hemoglobin molecule. So now you understand, it's a rise in partial pressure favors the binding of remaining 97% of the oxygen molecules with the hemoglobin. So now again repeat, some students will have a confusion. So first what happened? Sir, here there is high partial pressure, here there is low partial pressure. Because of the difference in the pressures, because of the difference in the partial pressures, oxygen will start to diffuse. Now out of the oxygen that is getting diffused, what happens first? So 3% of the oxygen dissolved. So when 3% oxygen dissolved, what will happen to the partial pressure? The partial pressure will rise from 40, it will rise to 100. Now there is more partial pressure. This high partial pressure is required for the binding of oxygen with the hemoglobin. So for the binding of oxygen to the hemoglobin, what is required? It's the partial pressure is required, and the partial pressure is because of the dissolved oxygen. And how much dissolved oxygen? 3% dissolved oxygen. Okay, so now tell me, at the end of the day, what happened to the blood? Now the blood become arterial blood. Now new oxygen is getting attached to the hemoglobin. So yes, now what happened to the blood? Now see, this hemoglobin is carrying 4 molecules of oxygen. How much percent saturated? 100% saturated. So this is your arterial blood. And what is the partial pressure of the arterial blood now? The partial pressure of oxygen in the arterial blood is how much? 100 mmHg because of the 3% dissolved oxygen. So right, how much blood we are talking about? Okay, 100 ml blood. How much hemoglobin is there? 15 grams of hemoglobin anyway there. And what is the hemoglobin saturation? 100% saturation, sir, all 4 occupied. And what is the partial pressure of oxygen? So the partial pressure of oxygen is 100 mmHg because 3% oxygen dissolved. No, here. See 3%, see now the partial pressure becomes 100. And what is the content of the oxygen? Now the content of the oxygen, now new molecules of oxygen came. Now it is 15 into 1.34 you can say. Okay, so oxygen, how much content of the oxygen? 20 ml. Always remember, arterial blood contains 20 ml of oxygen, venous blood contains 15 ml of oxygen. Okay, next step, tell me, now we have to transport this oxygen. We are having oxygen in 2 forms. One is in dissolved oxygen, other is in binding with hemoglobin, oxyhemoglobin. Now we have to transport this oxygen to where? To the tissues. Now tissues are waiting. We want oxygen. Tissues are waiting for the oxygen. Now look carefully. Sir, at the level of tissues, always, what is the partial pressure of oxygen? The partial pressure of oxygen always at the level of tissues. How much? It is 40 mmHg. It is 40 mmHg. Always it is 40 mmHg. The partial pressure of oxygen at the level of tissues, you can say PTO2. The partial pressure of oxygen at the level of tissues is always 40 mmHg. Now, what is the partial pressure of oxygen here? In the arterial blood, now the partial pressure of oxygen in the arterial blood, how much? Here it is 100 mmHg. So now you tell me, according to the fixed law of diffusion, high partial pressure, low partial pressure. So immediately, do you know what happens? First of all, tell me, this partial pressure, the 100 is because of what? 100 is because of the dissolved oxygen. No. So immediately, this 3% dissolved oxygen. 3% dissolved oxygen is going to immediately go from high partial pressure to low partial pressure. So oxygen is getting dissolved. Okay, the dissolved oxygen is getting diffused. So now finally tell me, are you gaining the dissolved oxygen or losing the dissolved oxygen? You are losing the dissolved oxygen. The oxygen is losing into the tissues. It's going into the tissues. So when you lose the dissolved oxygen, tell me what will happen. If you are losing the dissolved oxygen, the partial pressure will decrease. So that's the reason why now the partial pressure, from 100 it will decrease to where? From 100 it will decrease to again 40 mmHg, means equilibration. So 40 again becoming 40. Okay, you cannot change this, it's always 40. So now tell me what happened. Sir, your partial pressure increased or decreased? Partial pressure decreased. Now there is less partial pressure. Now less partial pressure means what? Sir, here try to understand. Whenever there is more partial pressure, whenever the partial pressure increases, hemoglobin accepts the oxygen. Hemoglobin accepts the 97% of the oxygen. Now tell me, exactly opposite. Whenever partial pressure decreases from 100 to 40, it is decreasing. Partial pressure decreases. Now hemoglobin will say, no, I don't want oxygen. Okay, now hemoglobin is releasing the remaining 97% of the oxygen. Now where this oxygen will go? Oxygen will go to the tissues. Now you understand? See, let me give you an analogy example. Sir, this hemoglobin, we write hemoglobin like HB, right? Hemoglobin as a HB, short form. HB stands for husband. Okay, so hemoglobin acts like husband. Why? Because see, whenever there is more partial pressure, it is accepting the oxygen. But whenever partial pressure is decreasing, it is releasing the oxygen. It's just simply like husband, sir. whenever there is more dowry, whenever you are getting more dowry, the husband is loving the wife, accepting the wife. Whenever the dowry decreases, what the husband is doing? Releasing the wife. More dowry, more acceptance, more loving. Whenever the dowry decreases, kicking out. Okay, so that's why hemoglobin we write it as HB. HB stands for husband. Now you understand? More the partial pressure. Whenever there is more partial pressure, more association. But at the level of tissues, whenever the partial pressure decreases, more dissociation. So from this, you tell me, sir, hemoglobin molecule loves to bind with oxygen or doesn't love to bind with oxygen? Simple question. Hemoglobin loves to bind with oxygen or doesn't love to bind with oxygen? Depends on partial pressure. It's the same hemoglobin. See, it's the same hemoglobin at the level of lungs. He's saying, I love oxygen. It's binding with the oxygen. It is accepting the oxygen. But it's the same hemoglobin molecule at the level of tissues. It is kicking the oxygen away. So yes, the association or dissociation, it is dependent on partial pressure. More partial pressure, more association, less partial pressure, more dissociation. Okay, understood? So now tell me where the oxygen is going. The oxygen is going to the tissues. Okay, oxygen is going to the tissues, and again the blood is becoming what? Again the blood is becoming deoxygenated blood. See, again 75% saturation, again deoxygenated. So I have asked you why it is 40. Now you understand? The partial pressure from 100, it is again going back to 40. Okay, the same 40 is continuing. So the partial pressure of oxygen in the venous blood is 40, the arterial blood is 100. Hemoglobin saturation 75%, 100%. Content of oxygen 15, 20. Okay, understood? So these are the differences. So finally, at the end of the day, what happened? Oxygen diffused to the tissues. So what is this effect called as? Guys, look at here. What is Bohr's effect? Sir, I always remember Bohr, like, hemoglobin is getting bored. Okay, bored of wife, sir. Bohr's effect. What is Bohr's effect? Bohr's effect means it's a release of oxygen. Release of oxygen molecules from where? From the hemoglobin. See, hemoglobin is releasing the oxygen. Why? The husband got bored of this wife. So he's kicking the wife out. So Bohr's effect is the release of oxygen from the hemoglobin to the tissues. Why? Why? Because of decrease in partial pressure. So whenever partial pressure decreases at the tissues, hemoglobin will release the oxygen to the tissues. This is called as Bohr's effect. So in the Bohr, which letter is there? O is there. O is there. So O means oxygen. So Bohr's is the release of oxygen. Later in the future videos, next videos, I will be explaining about the Haldane's effect. What is Haldane's? Haldane's is the release of carbon dioxide. Okay, later we will discuss. But for now, Bohr's is the release of oxygen to the tissues. Haldane's is the release of carbon dioxide to the lungs. Okay, so these are the differences. Now you know how it is different. Okay, how Bohr's is different from the Haldane's. Bohr's is the release of oxygen, Haldane's is the release of the carbon dioxide. And again I am telling you, sir, it's all the partial pressure dependent. Whenever the partial pressure is more, hemoglobin accepts the oxygen. Whenever the partial pressure decreases, hemoglobin releases the oxygen. Okay. Next up, what else you should know, guys? Our tissues are using how much oxygen? You have to know. Guys, we are sending 20 ml of oxygen. Let's say in every 100 ml of blood, how much oxygen we are transporting to the tissues? 20 ml of oxygen is going. So yeah, your tissues are using some oxygen. And how much oxygen is coming back? 15 ml. So now you tell me, sir, if I am talking about 100 ml of blood, if 100 ml of blood is going to the tissues, how much oxygen is used by the tissues? For every 100 ml of blood going to the tissues, our tissues are using 5 ml of oxygen. Because that's the difference, right? Arteriovenous oxygen difference is 5 ml, right? So 20 ml of oxygen is going to the tissues. And out of that 20 ml, 5 ml is used by the tissues and 15 ml is coming back to the venous blood. Okay. Now, my question to you, let's say we are sending 1000 ml of blood. That's 1 liter of blood to the tissues. So 100 ml supplies 5 ml of oxygen to the tissues. Our tissues are taking 5 ml. But if 1000 ml of blood is going, imagine 1000 ml of arterial blood is going to the tissues. Our tissues will use how much oxygen? Our tissues are going to take 50 ml of oxygen. Okay, 50 ml of oxygen our tissues are taking. But my question to you, do we have only 1000 ml of blood? We are sending 1000 ml of blood to the tissues? No. We are sending 5000 ml of blood. That's almost 5 liters of blood. That's our cardiac output. So every minute we are sending 5 liters of oxygenated blood. If 5 liters of oxygenated blood is going to all the tissues, how much our tissues will take? Our tissues are going to take 250 ml of oxygen. So this is the oxygen requirement. Okay, this is our oxygen requirement, guys. So now tell me, every minute for our survival, how much oxygen is going to our tissues? Every minute my tissues are using up how much oxygen? 250 ml of oxygen. So don't confuse, guys. See here, I am talking only about the 100 ml of blood. If 100 ml of blood is going, our tissues are using how much amount of oxygen? 5 ml of oxygen, because see difference, here 20, here 15. So our tissues are taking 5 ml of oxygen. But imagine if 5 liters of blood is going. If 5 liters of blood is going, how much oxygen is using by our tissues? 250 ml of oxygen is being used by our tissues. That is our oxygen demand. Okay. So with this, successfully what we have completed the topic of transport of oxygen. In the next video, we will be discussing about oxygen hemoglobin association dissociation curve, like including right shift, left shift, what is the P50 values, how they are different in different conditions. Okay. Hope the video is helpful. Thank you.